Hey guys, tonight we travel to the forests of West Africa, where moonlight filters through thick canopies and the trees themselves seem to murmur with memory. Somewhere in the distance, you hear it, a low, steady beat, barely more than a ripple in the night air. It starts as a pulse, faint and familiar, then grows into a message, one not spoken in words, but in rhythm, echoing from village to village like a heartbeat made of wood and breath. You're not sure what it means yet, but something inside you stirs. Maybe it's curiosity. Maybe it's the strange, eerie calm of knowing that entire conversations are happening right now, in tones you don't yet understand. You probably wouldn't survive this world without someone to translate. Every mistake could mean walking into the wrong territory, or missing a warning about a stampede of very annoyed buffalo. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening from somewhere special tonight, let me know where you are and what time it is in the comments. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake to the sound of drums. Not a full orchestra of noise, not a festival beat. Just one, low, deliberate, like someone knocking gently on the edge of your dream. You sit up slowly, brushing the sleep from your eyes, listening. The rhythm changes. 2 quick strikes, 1 pause, then a slow, drawn-out thump. It repeats. You realize this isn't just music, it's a message. You step out of your small hut, feet brushing over dry, packed earth, and walk toward the edge of the compound. You're not the only one who's heard it. Others emerge from doorways, eyes still heavy with sleep, drawn by the same coded sound. This is not just a drum. This is a voice. In much of pre-colonial West Africa, drums were not just instruments of celebration, they were tools of communication. Where written language was rare and oral tradition ruled, the drum rose to power as a kind of public loudspeaker, phone line, and town crier rolled into one. Among the Yoruba, the Asante, the Yue, and the Fawn, just to name a few, the drum didn't just mark time or accompany song. It spoke, literally. The sound seems to come from the grove at the edge of the village. You follow the rhythm, slipping between huts, passing chickens still huddled in the dust. The trees grow thicker, older here, and standing at the edge of them is an elder with gray-flecked hair and arms like carved roots, his hands resting on a long wooden drum. It's not much taller than a child, and it's been hollowed from a single log, its ends flared like open mouths. He beats the drum again. The rhythm seems to change slightly this time, faster, excited. He's saying that guests are coming, someone whispers beside you. From the Eastern Trail, maybe 4, maybe 5. You blink. That can't be right. You didn't hear anything that specific. But that's because you don't yet understand the language of the drum. See, unlike Western music, where rhythm is often abstract, in many West African traditions the drum mimics speech, specifically tonal speech. Languages like Yoruba or Twi aren't just about the syllables. You have to hit the right tone, or else mother becomes rice, becomes death, which makes for some very risky lullabies. And because of that, the drum must mimic those tones. Each beat is carefully tuned to rise and fall, not just to keep rhythm, but to imitate language. Imagine a talking xylophone and you're halfway there. The drum in front of you tonight is a talking drum, sometimes called a dun-dun in Yoruba or a tumpan in Akan regions. It's held under the arm, with leather cords tightening and loosening to shift the pitch. The drummer presses and releases the cords mid-beat, shaping each strike into something resembling speech. You notice now that the elder isn't just drumming with strength, he's speaking through his hands. And people are answering. Off in the distance, another drum replies. It's faint, but it carries. You can almost feel it through your chest. The elder smiles, without turning around. That's Nwata's village, someone says. They've heard the message. And so it begins. You find out quickly that the messages aren't arbitrary. Each village has its own rhythmic dialect, a kind of accent that lets others know where it came from. A series of quick descending beats might mean it's from the river folk. A slower, drawn-out pulse might mean it's from the dry hills to the north. Some messages are formulaic, like email signatures. Every message starts with who it's from, where, and often a bit of ego. It is I, son of the swiftest drummer, from the place of copper trees and wise women. And then the actual message begins. What's even more fascinating is how full sentences are compressed into musical phrases. The drums can't mimic every syllable, so the drummer relies on known phrases, shared context, and clever abbreviation. It's not unlike texting, except you're doing it across valleys with nothing but wood and instinct. Historians still argue whether these drummed languages could truly replicate full speech, or whether they simply hinted at it. Some say that for every phrase drummed, a listener had to already know the message in order to decode it. Others believe expert drummers could carry out full dialogues, even using proverbs and sarcasm. You decide to find out for yourself. The elder offers you a smaller drum. It's lighter, smoother, almost warm from sitting under the sun. You tap it once. It feels alive. Try saying your name, he says. You do your best, mimicking his motions. It comes out clumsy and flat. He chuckles softly. You just asked if anyone has spare onion. It was fair enough. You try again, listening to the rise and fall in your own voice, trying to match that same melody in your strikes. And this time, the reply from the far village comes back almost instantly, a cheerful little rhythm that makes everyone around you laugh. They said yes, someone tells you, but only if you dance for it. Apparently, you've been thrown into a conversation whether you like it or not. By morning, you no longer hear the drums as just noise. You start to hear intention, curves of meaning. That quick beat wasn't just rhythm, it was a question. That low, dragging thud, it held disappointment. You're beginning to grasp that the drum doesn't just mimic a voice, it mimics emotion. And in this village, it's not enough to strike a surface. You have to coax it, like trying to whistle a secret to someone who lives in another dream. You follow the elder into the forest. He moves slowly, deliberately, tapping his stick on the trunks of passing trees. You assume he's enjoying the walk, until you notice he only taps the largest trees. Then he stops at one and places his palm flat against its bark. Try it, he says without looking back. You press your hand against the trunk. It's surprisingly cool. You feel it before you hear it. A deep, hollow echo as the elder knocks gently with his knuckles. It reverberates like a held breath. This one, he says softly, wants to speak. Choosing the tree is not random. It's not even just about acoustics. Among the Yoruba and other forest-dwelling peoples, trees have spirits, sacred ones. The belief isn't just poetic, it's woven into every decision. The best talking drums come from trees like the Iroko, the Obeche, or the Danta. Each one brings its own personality to the final drum. Some carry a rounder voice, some are sharper, some are temperamental and crack in dry seasons like grumpy grandfathers. You're told that cutting down such a tree is not done lightly. In fact, the tree must agree. You chuckle softly at the idea until you see the seriousness in the elder's face. A small offering is placed at the base of the tree, ground kola nuts, some oil, a whisper in a language older than the Empire of Mali. You feel a strange reverence hang over the moment, and somehow it makes sense. If you want the forest to carry your words, you should probably ask first. Once chosen, the tree is felled carefully, never all at once. The log is left in the sun, turned slowly each day like a child sleeping. Then comes the carving. You spend hours watching the woodworkers at their craft. No power tools, no rulers, just curved blades, fire-polished edges, and years of muscle memory. The hollowing begins from one end. The center is scooped out to create a resonance chamber. 2 slits are carved along the top, shaping the drum's mouth. The thickness of the remaining wood determines the pitch. The more you learn, the more you realize that the drum isn't built, it's raised. There's something familial in the process, like raising a child who will one day carry your name to distant ears. Some drums are shaped like hourglasses. These are the ones held under the arm with cords stretched from head to head. The tension can be shifted mid-performance, letting the pitch slide up and down like a human voice. Others are large and heavy, mounted on stands, carved with ancestral figures. These are ceremonial, drums with the gravitas of royalty. You help oil the surface of one drum, rubbing it with shea butter and ground camwood. The scent rises warm and earthy. The elder shows you how to wrap the hide, goat usually for its bounce, cow for deeper resonance, never pig. You asked once, you won't again. The skin is stretched tight across the top and laced with cords, creating a kind of living tension. Too loose and it flops like bad gossip. Too tight and it cracks under pressure, like bad gossip about you. Now comes the test. The first strike. You're told to stand back. The elder lifts his mallet, just a polished stick really, and pauses. You notice the way he holds his breath, then he strikes. The sound is enormous, not in volume, but in presence. It doesn't just ring out, it arrives. The air seems to gather around it. Birds pause. Even your own thoughts freeze for a moment. That's when it hits you. This is more than a drum. It's a transmitter of attention. It draws people in before it even says anything. Some drums are even named. Not metaphorically, legally. They are treated as entities. The dun-dun of a royal court, for example, may be considered an official representative of the king. When it speaks, its words are law. If it praises, you beam. If it mocks, you blush. If it's silent, you worry. But even these royal drums begin with humble lessons. You're given your own small practice drum. You name it trouble. The elder laughs. You begin by learning the simple tones, high and low, then combinations, low, low, high, low, low. They represent different vowel sounds. But when you add rhythm, spacing, and tone together, you start to say things, actual things, like come eat, or we found the cow, or please don't marry your cousin again. Each night you return to your mat exhausted, but humming with quiet excitement. You begin to dream in drum beats. You start hearing phrases in the wind, the way leaves rattle. Your brain is tuning itself to another way of speaking. Historians still argue how precise this linguistic mapping truly was. Some believe that drummed messages could only approximate speech, requiring listeners to guess. Others argue that with enough training, entire arguments could be transmitted verbatim. What's clear is that people remembered the messages, for weeks, even months. Oral memory was muscle, and repetition was ritual. But here's something fun they don't teach you in textbooks. You find out that some villages use decoy rhythms. Yep, if outsiders approached, the drummers might send out a welcome rhythm, while a second drummer quietly tapped out a warning to the hunters hidden in the trees. Dual messaging. One rhythm for public ears, another for those who know how to listen sideways. It's kind of like tweeting in sarcasm. If you know, you know. By the end of the week, you can drum your name properly. You've even figured out how to say, I didn't mean to eat it, it was an accident, in tones, which earns you a suspicious look from the cook. But your proudest moment comes one twilight evening when the elder nods toward the forest and says, tell them supper is ready. You take your stance, you press your arm against the cords, you raise your mallet, and you begin to speak. It takes just 30 seconds after your message ends for the reply to come back. From somewhere deep in the trees, maybe a kilometer away, you hear it. 3 sharp beats, a pause, then a chirping phrase that sounds unmistakably amused. You glance at the elder, who's already smiling. They said they'll come, he murmurs, but they want you to serve the millet beer. You've been gently roasted, in public, across a drum line. Welcome to the world of talking drums. Tonight, you eat quickly, not because you're in a rush, but because you've been invited to sit with the elders. not as a guest this time, but as a learner, a listener. The fire crackles, throwing shadows onto the mud walls. Behind you, a baby fusses. Somewhere in the distance, another drum echoes, just once, and then silence. The elder across from you leans forward, hands folded. Time to learn the whispers. You blink. I thought we were already learning the language? He chuckles. We taught you the words. Now you must learn the spaces between them. This, you realize, is the real art. See, drumming isn't just about what's said, it's also about how it's said. The cadence, the swing, the breath between beats. You thought it was just percussion. Turns out it's more like jazz, if jazz could also tell you to watch out for leopards on the Southern Trail. The talking drums, especially in traditions like those of the Akan, Yoruba, and Iwe, don't just parrot language, they transform it, expand it, shrink it, stylize it. What looks like a simple sentence might carry meaning on several levels: literal, metaphorical, ceremonial. You learn this firsthand during a mock exercise. Your task: relay a message to the next village that simply says, "We will meet at the river tomorrow." Easy, right? Wrong. The elder shows you the full phrase. Children of the Calabash Gourd, prepare your legs, for the path will soon speak with water. Wait, what? Apparently that's the poetic form. It's not just prettier, it's recognizable. Drum messages often use culturally embedded metaphors to make the meaning clearer and harder to misinterpret. Path will speak with water equals river crossing. Prepare your legs equal travel. Children of the Calabash equals your clan. If you had tried to drum, "We will meet at the river tomorrow," you'd likely get nothing but a confused reply. Who is we? Which river? Why not today? Also, who taught you to drum like that? This layer of meaning, these verbal codes, is what separates beginner drummers from the true masters. You practice late into the night, trying to stretch the rhythm into something that feels alive. It's a lot like sculpting wind. The elders correct your pauses, shift your tone, roll their eyes in mock horror when you accidentally say, "Prepare your goats," instead of "prepare your legs." Your mistakes become entertainment, but they're gentle about it. Everyone starts somewhere. And here's a fun fringe tidbit they slip into the conversation over baobab tea. In some regions, talking drums were used to flirt. Tea. You raise an eyebrow. The elder leans in conspiratorially. "A drummer would send a rhythm at dusk," he explains, "to a woman 2 compounds over. Something sweet. A proverb, maybe. Something that says, 'Your eyes are 2 rivers I keep falling into.'" You try not to laugh. She might reply with a proverb of her own, or silence, which says even more. But that's not even the strangest use you hear about. There was once a drummer, the story goes, who sent riddles by drum, actual puzzles. The entire neighboring village spent weeks trying to solve one before finally responding with a riddle of their own. The two communities never met face to face, just traded mysteries for months, all by wood and skin. Historians still argue whether this story is literal truth or a myth built from many similar tales. But either way, you kind of love it. It's like a slow-motion Twitter thread, written by trees and answered by lightning. Your hands are starting to blister from practice. One elder gives you a tip. Rub them with shea and ash. The mixture toughens the skin. You'll need it. Tomorrow, you're joining a real conversation. You're nervous. You barely passed the "don't accidentally insult someone's ancestors" module. But the elders say you're ready. The next morning, you're sent to a small rise overlooking the forest. From here, 3 villages are within sound range. You sit cross-legged, your drum on your knees, and wait. Eventually, the signal comes. 4 sharp taps, then a slow, steady phrase. You recognize it. Where is the elder with the crooked tooth? This is an actual message, not a drill. You take a breath. Your reply, based on the forms you've practiced, becomes, "He is sitting under the tree that drinks sideways." a polite way of saying he's snoozing under the mango tree again. The answer returns, rapid fire. Then wake him or we will all grow roots. You grin. This isn't just messaging. This is rhythmic performance. See, conversation with a flair for the dramatic. You start to appreciate the blend of function and flair, of signal and style. It's not enough to say something. You have to say it well. And now that you're paying attention, you notice the variations in accent. That village's drummer uses shorter phrases. This one pauses a beat longer between clauses. Another tends to open every message with a rolling cascade, like he's always warming up the crowd. It's not unlike different radio hosts or podcast voices. Everyone's got a style, and even errors become part of the rhythm. One time, a drummer messes up and accidentally says, "The yam has married the rain," instead of "the yams are ready after the rain." Instead of correcting it, the responding village sends congratulations. For the rest of the week, they pretend to prepare wedding gifts for a tuber. The forest echoes with laughter. You start to understand how this system endured for centuries. It's fast, it's flexible, it's infused with personality, and it operates with no wires, no electricity, no data plan. Just wood, tension, and people who care enough to listen. One night, curled in your mat, you hear a soft rhythm in your dreams. You can't be sure if it's real or imagined. It simply says, "The trees remember." The first time you hear a drum beat you don't recognize, it feels like a word misheard in conversation, a strange note in a familiar tune. You're sitting beside your teacher, the elder with the bent left pinky and the eyes that squint when he listens, not from age, but from the pure effort of decoding. He cocks his head toward the forest. 3 long beats, then a pause, then 2 quick taps. He doesn't respond right away. Instead, he turns to you. "That's not one of ours." You listen harder. The rhythm is unfamiliar, not in a dangerous way, just different. It rolls rather than snaps, its beats cascading like soft stones in a stream. "That's from over the ridge," the elder says. "Probably the Abo clan. You didn't know there were people over the ridge, but apparently the drums did." It turns out that every village, and often every extended family group, develops its own signature rhythm. Not just a style, like musical flair, but a literal, recognizable fingerprint. A unique cadence, greeting, or phrasing that immediately identifies the source before the actual message begins. Think of it like a ringtone attached to a name, except here, the name is drummed in a poetic formula. In Yoruba traditions, for example, a drum message might begin with praise names, ancestral lines, clan metaphors, or titles. "He who walks with thunder, son of the leopard skin woman," might be a perfectly reasonable way to introduce yourself. These formulas do more than identify the sender, they set the tone. The rhythm from over the ridge continues. Your elder lets it play out. "They're announcing a harvest," he murmurs after a while. "They always use that call. Listen to the ending. It bows downward, like the last scoop from a bowl." You don't quite hear it yet, but you're learning. These differences are what allow the system to span huge regions. Among the Lokale people of the Congo, drummed messages could travel upwards of 20 miles in a single transmission chain. In Ghana, the Akan would send messages from village to village like a forest relay. It's not unlike passing a note down a row in class, except here, the note is a vibration, and the classroom is the entire equatorial belt. You find out that some drum languages, like the tonal surrogate languages of the Yu and Yoruba, aren't strictly linguistic, but instead follow predictable cultural scripts. They don't convey every syllable. Instead, they rely on shared context and idiomatic rhythm. It's like hearing, "Guess who's back?" and already knowing who. And that opens up a new kind of challenge. Sometimes, 2 villages with the same language still drum in completely different ways. Regional identity, historical feats, UDS, even jokes passed down in rhythm form can shift the cadence from place to place. Sometimes the message is only part of what's being said, the elder says one evening, as you both listen to a drum line under a full moon. The rest is who said it. and how they said it. You nod, but your mind's already racing. What if a message is intercepted by someone from another region? Would they even understand it? Turns out maybe not. Messages can be cloaked in regional metaphors, disguised by accents, or phrased so obscurely that only the intended recipients grasp the real meaning. You're told of one old trick. A village once trained their drummer to shift the order of beats in a way that reversed phrases. Outsiders could hear it, but couldn't make sense of it. It's drum-level Pig Latin. Historians still debate how much variation existed across regions. Some argue that certain rhythms became standardized over time, especially in royal courts where trained drummers were employed as official messengers. Others believe the codes remained fluid, molded by migration, war, trade, and sheer creativity. What's certain is that even neighboring villages could have rhythm feuds. One day, you hear a quick volley of beats that sound oddly dismissive, like someone tapping a spoon too hard on a bowl just to make a point. That, the elder says with a smirk, is the drummer from across the river again, always rushing, always clattering. Apparently, that drummer once flubbed a royal announcement so badly, he became a village punchline. People still imitate his botched rhythm during festivals. You realize drumming can carry reputation, not just of the speaker, but of their whole community, which makes the stakes a little higher than just hitting the wrong note. You also start hearing layered sounds, two drummers playing at once. At first you think it's just a duet, but then you realize one is shadowing the other. That's a master and apprentice, the elder says. One speaks, the other echoes. This call and response style, antiphony if you want to impress your dinner guests, is more than a teaching tool. It reinforces rhythm memory, it ensures redundancy, and it shows just how much the culture values oral training. You ask if anyone writes these rhythms down. The elder shakes his head. If we wrote them, they'd stop living. You try to imagine this. Entire conversations, lineages, decisions made, arguments resolved, all passed through rhythm and memory, not a single sentence inked in a book. But then again, when the forest itself listens, maybe ink is unnecessary. You begin to notice rhythm outside the drums too. In the pestles that pound yam in the morning, tap, tap, pause. In the call of birds, some species even mimic local drum patterns. In the way the goats shuffle and snort when someone walks past with a drum under their arm, like they know news is coming. Every sound starts to feel like language, but with every language comes a kind of etiquette. You're taught how not to interrupt a drum message, how to wait for the tail phrase, the verbal full stop. You learn how to reply with silence, how to show respect through restraint, and how sometimes not answering at all is its own kind of message. One evening, a message comes through from a village farther than usual. The rhythm is slow, formal, almost mournful. The elder listens, hands folded. Afterward, no one replies. Not because it's rude, but because the message speaks of someone who has passed. To reply would be to interrupt grief. Instead, the villagers light a small fire at the compound's edge. The drum becomes a eulogy. You sit in the silence, humbled. The forest has become a cathedral, and the drums, its stained glass windows, offering a light that speaks in color and sound, even long after the sun has gone. You wake to the sound of laughter wrapped in rhythm. It's not just casual lay, utter. It's deliberate, contagious, and somehow musical. You step outside into the warm morning light, rubbing your eyes, and realize the drummers are already at it again. But today's rhythm feels different, not solemn, not urgent, just playful. One of the elder boys claps in time with it, giggling. They're saying banana again, he tells you, still grinning. Banana? He nods. But not just banana. They're saying the new boy tried to eat it with the peel on. You frown, mildly offended. It was dark and nobody explained the local custom. Still, the rhythm continues. Tum-tum-tum, pause. Pa-pa, wee. You can practically hear the banana falling. Today, you're learning how to say everyday things through the drum, not declarations of war, not births or deaths, just ordinary stuff. The shopping list, the weather, your very regrettable snack choices. And to do that, you need to understand the tonal language. See, many West African languages, like Yoruba, Igbo, and Iwe, aren't just built on consonants and vowels. They're tonal, meaning a word's meaning changes based on the pitch it's spoken with. Think about the word ba. In Yoruba, ba might mean to meet, ba could mean to spoil, and ba might mean father. One word, many fates. And now imagine translating that into a drum beat. That's the miracle of the talking drum. It replicates speech tones in rhythm. A rise, a fall, a pause, all represent specific syllables and words. But it's not just a 1-1 mapping. You can't simply whack out banana syllable by syllable and expect anyone to understand. So instead, drum languages often use elaborate phrases that hint at the word through metaphor or idiom. Rather than say banana, the drum might say fruit that wears its yellow coat until it sleeps. Or for elephant, it might drum something like, he who shakes the earth when he walks, child of the giant grass. That's right, drum poetry is alive and well, even when discussing groceries. And it serves a purpose. Because drum languages can't represent every tone perfectly, they rely on recognizable phrases that act like acoustic shortcuts. Everyone knows the phrase, so they know the meaning, even if part of it gets swallowed by wind or echoes across valleys. This is where you come in. Your teacher challenges you to send a message that includes 5 objects and 2 actions. You're allowed no speech, just your drum. You sweat through your first attempt. Your pepper sounds suspiciously like lizard, and you accidentally tell someone their goat has exploded, which, to be fair, would be urgent. But slowly, you start to get it. You learn the drum name for rain is often played with a rolling pattern like distant thunder. Fire gets a rapid, crackling beat. Salt is nearly always paired with a metaphor, white sand that disappears. Even actions have flavor. Walk isn't just walk, it's the feet greet the earth again. Eat might be the mouth calls the hand to kindness. You begin to realize that even though the messages are utilitarian, they still carry beauty. Every simple thing is dressed in imagery, like the way some people write grocery lists in cursive, just for the joy of the curve. Here's a delightful fringe tidbit. In some regions, the word for wife is played as one who shares my shadow, and in others, chicken becomes the bird who forgets it cannot fly. You drum a little message about bananas, hoping to redeem yourself. This time, you include the proper idiom and a phrase that means, humble student asks forgiveness. The reply is gracious, and includes a joke about whether you'll try to eat the drum next. Historians still debate whether these phrases were universal across drumming cultures, or more like memes, evolving by region, sometimes even by season. Some scholars argue that the poetic phrases were frozen metaphors, while others believe they were constantly reinvented by skilled drummers. What's certain is that these poetic phrases weren't random. They followed cultural logic, and often reinforced shared values. One elder explains it this way: the drum doesn't just say the word, it says what we think about the word. A goat isn't just livestock. It's the one who never stops talking when it eats. A river isn't just water. It's the road without dust. A child is the future that pretends to be small. You can't help but be swept up in it. Even the mundane becomes layered with meaning. A drum call that says, "Bring the hoe," might actually include a phrase like, "the iron that tickles the soil awake." So much for boring errands. You also begin to notice that repetition plays a role in comprehension. Important messages, like market days or funeral times, are drummed multiple times with slightly different phrasings. It's not redundancy, it's clarification. Much like how you might say, "It's at 5, 5 o'clock, just before sundown." The message is shaped by the listener, not just the sender. And sometimes, entire conversations are crafted with polite buildup. Before requesting firewood, you might first compliment the village, praise their drummers, offer a proverb. Then, finally, gently suggest that a few good logs wouldn't go unappreciated. It's the slow texting version of diplomacy. Of course, this isn't all just verbal gymnastics. There's real power in getting the tone right, literally. One afternoon, you try to drum a message to the children to come home. You miss the tone. Instead of return, you hit something closer to circle. The children form a ring and begin spinning happily. Lesson learned: if you confuse your tones, you will create new rituals. But that's part of the joy. The talking drum is equal parts utility, poetry, and performance. It doesn't judge. It delivers meaning. It transforms it. And in doing so, it gives even the simplest objects, bananas, hoes, goats, their own personality. By the end of the day, you feel like you've learned how to talk to the village's grocery basket. But more importantly, you're beginning to listen differently. You no longer ask, "What does that mean?" Now you wonder, "What does that feel like?" And somewhere in the distance, the drum chuckles. You're awoken not by the drum, but by silence. Thick, pressing silence, like someone held the sky's breath in their palm. You sit up. It's not yet dawn, but already the compound is buzzing. Not with panic, with anticipation. You catch it in the eyes of the elders, the children, the women bent over early cooking fires. Something is about to happen. Then the drum speaks. Not one, but 3 drums, in harmony. One steady and strong, one light and quick, one dancing between them like a clever child dodging puddles. You're told this rhythm means gathering, but not just for work or chores. Today, the drums are broadcasting a full community announcement. A wedding is coming, and everyone is invited, whether they live here or 10 miles beyond the river. You throw on your best wrapper, grab your little practice drum just in case, and join the others heading toward the center of the village, where the big drum sits like a throne. It thumps again, a cheerful, swinging beat. Come and see, it seems to say. Come and witness joy. This is your first introduction to social drumming, the way messages move beyond necessity and become the heart of the community. Gossip, jokes, advice, rebukes, even matchmaking. These all live within the wood, bouncing from tree to tree like musical birds with juicy secrets. Today's message is layered. First, the announcement. Daughter of the Calabash clan marries son of the hunter who smiles in his sleep. Then the invitation. All mouths are welcome at the yam feast. Bring no weapons, only dancing feet. Then the schedule. The sun will reach Tipchuant. He top of the sky, then lean left. Come then. You marvel at the elegance of it. No RSVP needed. No printed invites. Just a signal that travels for miles and delivers not just logistics, but mood. People begin arriving before noon. They trickle in with baskets of cola, bottles of palm wine, and wrapped bundles you can't identify. Some come drumming their own family rhythms. Others answer back in short, playful bursts. One group drums a phrase that loosely translates to, "We heard there would be meat. Was that a lie?" Laughter ripples through the crowd. Another replies, "The goat was warned. It stayed anyway." You start to see the layers. Drumming here isn't just function. It's performance. It's dialogue. It's stand-up comedy with tree trunks. Your elder explains that drumming during ceremonies follows its own etiquette. There are rhythms reserved for certain events: weddings, funerals, first harvests, initiations. Some rhythms belong to specific families, and using them without permission is a social faux pas, like borrowing someone's toothbrush and then giving a speech with it. You watch as a master drummer steps up. He plays a phrase that makes the entire elder circle burst into delighted chuckles. You ask your teacher what was said. He just told the groom, "If your yam is small, don't blame the basket." You nearly choke on your groundnut cake. As the ceremony unfolds, the drums continue, adapting to every shift in energy. When the bride enters, the rhythm turns soft, rolling, reverent. When the couple exchanges gifts, the tempo sharpens, playful again. During dancing, it explodes. But here's the magic. Even in celebration, the drum still speaks. When one guest gets a little too drunk and starts telling everyone how they once wrestled a leopard, which was actually just a goat with mange, the drum interrupts with a mocking trill that means liar who true, EPS on his own tongue. The crowd roars, but the man, thoroughly roasted by drum, simply bows and joins the dancers. Gossip, too, travels by drum. You hear whispers of how the bride's family was worried, something about the groom's younger brother and a misused chicken coop. The details are sketchy, but by afternoon, a drum from a nearby village sends a cheeky phrase. The coop may wobble, but the egg is whole. You're not entirely sure what it means. But apparently, neither is the elder who hears it. He mutters, and orders another round of stew. Historians still argue whether talking drums were truly used for gossip, or whether that's an over-romanticized reading of ceremonial rhythms. Some believe that even these social messages were tightly controlled by elders. Others point to oral histories full of mischievous drummers and rhythm feuds that lasted generations. Whatever the truth, today feels like proof. The drum is fully alive, laughing, teasing, narrating the story of the day in real time. You begin to understand that in this world, everyone is listening, even if they pretend not to be. And because everyone's listening, every message is a kind of theater. One group drums a flirtation from the far end of the crowd. You can't see who sent it, but the reply, swift, coy, and full of metaphor, comes from somewhere near the cooking pots. You're told that many couples have met this way, sending messages disguised as praise songs, replying with proverbs, then maybe arranging a meeting at the river where fish forget their names. You decide to try your own playful message, something harmless. You drum slowly and carefully. The stranger with the crooked hand wishes to know the name of the music. Silence. Then, a few minutes later, a light rhythm. Music has many names. Which one do you wish to dance with? You grin, heart pounding. Was that a reply? To you? You glance around but see nothing but dancers and shadows. The message could have come from anyone. That's the joy and mystery of the doctor. As the sun begins to dip, the ceremony transitions into feasting. The drums soften into background rhythms, gentle phrases that tell people where to find water, where to rest, when to take off their shoes. Even these little messages are wrapped in poetry. The gourd sleeps by the cold stone. Translation: water jars are over by the shady rocks. You sit by the fire, belly full, head buzzing. You've heard at least a dozen conversations today, all through rhythm. Love notes, warnings, requests, apologies, brags, mockery, blessings. And you realize something important. The drum doesn't just carry news, it carries relationships. Like a village-wide group chat, but made of skin and wood and echoes. And unlike words that can be denied, rhythms live in memory. They roll through the trees, through the people. They stick in your feet when you walk home. Long after the last beat fades, you're still hearing them in your dreams. Your hands are shaking. Not from fear, from the sheer weight of the 2 carved drumsticks now resting in your palm, passed to you by the elder this morning with a nod that carried more meaning than a dozen proverbs. No ceremony, no speech, just, they'll be listening today. And that's how you became the village messenger. Well, a village messenger. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. Still, it's no small thing. You've been training for weeks, maybe months, depending on how long you've been dreaming in beat patterns. And today, the rhythm is yours to carry. Your first task, a message to the Western Hills. They've asked for news about the grain harvest and whether the rains have softened the river crossings. You're expected to reply with detail, tone, and a little flair. Because if there's anything more unforgivable than muddy boots, it's a boring rhythm. You take your place under the talking tree, what you've come to think of as your trees. And you begin. One long tone to announce your presence, two short pulses to mark the clan. Then the message unfurls. Children of the bright stone, hear this. The sky has wept twice, and the ground now feeds the roots with joy. The granaries hold laughter, though the yam mound still sulks. You finish with a standard parting rhythm. Let your ears travel faster than your feet. You wait. Then it comes. A reply. Our ears have tripped over your joy. We send thanks wrapped in feathers. Success. You're not just transmitting, you're performing. You're taking information and shaping it into something that moves, not just from village to village, but from person to person. You feel like a radio host, a town crier, and a stand-up comic, all rolled into one. And now that you're in the role, you realize how much trust it requires. Because not all drummers are messengers. Some are musicians. Some are ritual specialists. Some are oral historians who can beat out genealogies that go back 10 generations. But the messenger? That's someone who represents, who speaks for the village, sometimes even the chief, with the understanding that every syllable will be heard, remembered, and possibly quoted out of context in someone's wedding speech 5 years from now. No pressure. You quickly learn that context is everything. That rhythm you practiced yesterday to mean the water has returned to the fields? Turns out it also means the spirits are coming for dinner, depending on how it's framed. That little miscommunication led to a neighboring village sacrificing a perfectly good chicken for nothing. They were gracious about it. You still got teased. You're lucky they didn't eat you instead of the chicken, someone quipped. You file that one under lessons learned the crunchy way. As a messenger, you also gain access to certain codes. Some are simple, formulas for directions. Go left, when the hill smells like yam. Or dates, the day after the goat sneezes at the moon. Translation, 2 nights from now. Others are more sensitive. Messages about illness, disputes, or boundary disagreements are often phrased in oblique rhythm. They rely on tone, innuendo, and proverbs known only to a few. You're taught how to construct a phrase that says, "We don't want war," without ever using the word war. Something like, "The spear has no place in the garden. Let the seeds choose peace." Elegant, and just vague enough to be deniable. Historians still argue whether these message forms functioned as diplomacy or simply rumor control. Some claim drum messengers were as influential as oral historians. Others believe they were like living newspapers, useful, respected, and occasionally misquoted by people who only heard the first half of the beat. You decide it's probably both, and now you've become part of it. You get your first solo assignment 3 days after your promotion. A border message between your village and a small riverside clan whose chief is known for being particular. He once rejected a marriage proposal because the praise name of the bride's grandfather translated to "he who sleeps during storms." You're told to deliver a message confirming shared use of a fishing bend. Simple, right? You spend the whole night composing the phrasing, not too formal, not too casual. You test different metaphor bundles. Water that forgets the name of fish. Net that does not bite the hand. Hook with 2 smiles. Eventually you settle on a slow, respectful tone. The bend that feeds both mouths asks no argument. We stretch our nets as brothers, and the fish will judge our skill. You're barely halfway through when the reply cuts in. The fish already laugh at your hooks. Ah. Apparently this is his way of agreeing. You return to the village, at the successful confirmation. Everyone pretends not to notice how pale you look. Someone pats you on the back and offers roasted plantain. For your courage, they say solemnly. The role comes with other perks. You're now invited to certain evening gatherings, not the big ones, yet, but the quiet circle of elders who review messages, gossip softly, and sometimes compose entire messages just to respond to a joke sent 3 villages away. One such message is, "Tell the woman who bakes the millet cakes that the wind carried one into my yard. I've kept it safe in my mouth." You're not allowed to ask who that's for. But based on the quiet cackling that follows, it was well received. Sometimes you're asked to memorize an entire day's messages before the drum even starts. You might spend the morning practicing with no audience, then deliver 5 or 6 sequences in the afternoon without a single note in front of you. There's no written script, no teleprompter, just memory, rhythm, and the knowledge that the entire forest is listening. You start to appreciate the rhythm of life in new ways. How the days are shaped not just by weather, but by messages. Who is traveling? Who is feasting? Who is mourning? The drum becomes your sense of time. You even begin to anticipate messages, the way a farmer listens to the wind before the rain. You hear the first beat and already guess the rest. You're not just carrying messages anymore. You're reading the air. And somewhere, tucked inside your thoughts, is the realization. This is not just tradition. This is infrastructure. This is how communities hold together across miles of thick forest, across borders, across generations. With wood, with tone, with trust, and with just enough room for the occasional joke about fish hooks and stolen millet cakes. Today's lesson begins in the rain. You didn't plan it this way. No one did. But sometimes the sky decides to drum louder than you can, and all you can do is listen. The first drops fall soft as whispers. Then they gather speed, bouncing off the broad. Banana leaves like 1,000 tiny feet. You're sitting under the eaves of the elder's hut with your practice drum in your lap, watching the path turn to a lazy stream. You think, well, that's the day ruined. But your teacher just smirks. "This," he says, "is perfect drumming weather." You raise an eyebrow. He explains, sound travels better in the rain, cooler air, softer ground, fewer interruptions from noisy birds or shouting children. And besides, the damp mutes background clutter. What's left is a clearer canvas for sound. Moments later, he proves his point. You hear it from far off, beyond the river bend. A single drumbeat, steady as a heartbeat. Then 2 others join in, staggered. A reply, a challenge. A whole conversation traveling across a soaked forest. You can't even see the other villages, but you hear them, you feel them. This is your introduction to long-distance drumming, not just for fun or gossip, but as a network. Forget Wi-Fi. These villages have had a communication system for centuries, complete with encryption, headers, and acknowledgements. But instead of fiber optics, it runs on tree trunks, muscle memory, and the way sound curls through wet air. In places like Nigeria, Ghana, and the Congo, it's said a skilled drummer could transmit a detailed message across 20-30 kilometers in under an hour, using a network of villages like relay towers. Each village would receive the message, decode it, then pass it along in their own dialect or in a standard rhythm set aside for long-distance clarity. There were even specific drummers trained only for relay work, men and women who might not attend the ceremony, but could carry its rhythm across a dozen hills without missing a beat. Your elder gestures toward the door. "Come," he says. "You're ready to join the echo." You follow him into the rain. The sound changes as you step beyond the shelter. Airy raindrop is a soft counterpoint. The mud squelches beneath your feet. Your drum, wrapped in oiled cloth, stays dry. At the top of a nearby hill, a tall wooden platform stands above the trees. It's barely more than a tower of lashed poles and flat boards, but from here, you can see across the valley. And more importantly, you can be heard. You climb slowly, careful not to slip. The wind up here tastes like mango and wet charcoal. Below you, smoke curls from a dozen breakfast fires. The elder hands you a small signaling drum. Today, you send a chain message. You glance out over the valley. Somewhere beyond the hills, a neighboring village is waiting to receive it. Your job? To transmit this rhythm clearly enough that it can be picked up, repeated, and delivered miles away, possibly by someone you've never met. You begin. First, the standard call. 4 quick beats, 1 low roll. It announces a public message, nothing private, nothing urgent. Then comes the header. From the people of the High Mango, your village's name. Then, the rains have returned. The road near the Red Hill is soft. Delay trade for 1 day. Pass it on. It's not flashy, but it matters. A group of traders who leave now could lose carts in the mud or worse, cross a flooded stream. The message is delivered. You wait. Far off, so faint you nearly miss it, you hear the reply. Another drum, then another, a rhythmic confirmation. Message received, will relay. Your skin prickles. You're not just playing anymore. You're connected. And suddenly you understand. This was the internet before the internet. Not just sound, but information infrastructure. Each village like a node. Each drummer a packet router. Each message encoded in a rhythm only those trained to listen could understand. Some scholars believe this drumming system was so efficient it rivaled early telegraph networks. Others remain skeptical, arguing about transmission accuracy, linguistic limits, and the challenges of rain-soaked drum skins. And as you stand in the drizzle, watching the mist roll across the hills, it's hard to believe anything could be more effective. The forest is alive with messages. It's a low murmur, a heartbeat, 1,000 conversations flitting from tree to tree, and sometimes multiple chains run at once. A drum to the south might be carrying a birth announcement. One to the west might be delivering news of a boundary agreement. Another could be transmitting a coded warning about wandering elephants. You ask your teacher how they keep messages from overlapping. He smiles. We listen with both ears. In truth, experienced drummers learn to distinguish rhythm by sender, by tone, even by pattern quirks. One drummer tends to rush the last beat. Another favors a slightly longer pause between phrases. These tiny fingerprints help sort overlapping messages like layers of music in a symphony. There are even rhythm timestamps. A phrase like, "When the rooster calls once but the fire sleeps," might indicate the early dawn hours. Others encode urgency, sharp staccato beats for danger, long flowing rolls for peaceful updates. The complexity blows your mind. And yes, you can send entire paragraphs this way. You're told about a festival message from years ago that included greetings from 23 people, 4 jokes, a proverb, and 2 complaints about food. It took nearly 40 minutes to transmit, but it made it, beat for beat, through 5 relay villages. Today you only transmit once. But by evening, you hear the message echoed back from a returning trade party. We heard you. We waited. The river thanks you. It's a moment of surreal pride. Your message bounced through the forest like a stone skipping water. Villages you've never seen, people who don't know your face, acted on your words because they trusted the drum, because they listened. By nightfall, you're back in the compound, drying, your drum near the fire. Someone asks if you'll become a full-time signal drummer. You shrug. I'm just happy I didn't tell anyone to trade goats for rainbows again. They laugh, but they also nod. Because the forest never forgets a badly timed message. By now, your hands move on their own. Not perfectly, not gracefully, but with a kind of rhythm that lives in your bones, like walking, or breathing, or reaching for roasted plantain without looking. And more importantly, you're learning how to listen beyond words. Today, the drum doesn't just say, "Come quick." It says urgency wrapped in mourning. You hear it not just in the tempo, but in the texture, the low pitch dragging like a sigh, the irregular rhythm skipping like someone stumbling through tears. You find the elder seated beside his drum, eyes closed, fingers tapping silently on his knees. "She has passed," he says. You don't need to ask who. The message was clear, but it wasn't explicit. That's the magic of what you're learning now, how the drums say what words can't, how they carry emotion, not just syllables. You've stepped into the subtle art of emotional drumming. It's not a new discovery. Among the Yu, Akan, Yoruba, and others, drummers have long known how to layer meaning with rhythm, how to play sorrow without saying death, or joy without naming the cause. And the community knows how to hear it. Some rhythms aren't meant to be decoded logically. They're felt, like a cousin's voice cracking on the phone. You don't need the details to know something hurts. You're told of a rhythm used only when a child is born, breach. It begins soft, climbs unexpectedly, then ends with a rapid tap that sounds like a midwife gasping. You hear it once at sunset and find yourself holding your breath. That evening, you ask the elder how such rhythms are taught. He laughs. They're not. Apparently, many of the most emotionally resonant rhythms aren't formal, they're improvised. Passed on not through instruction, but experience. You feel the moment, you play the moment, and, like a seasoned storyteller, you learn when to pause. One pause too long and your message feels ominous. Too short, and it loses gravity. The pacing of emotion is a learned art, and a sensitive one. Some say the drum speaks better when the drummer is quiet inside. You're not sure what that means until you sit alone at twilight, your hands resting on the wood, and you simply breathe. You're not trying to say anything, but somehow the rhythm comes anyway. A slow, soft pattern. You play it twice. Someone near the cooking fires looks up. Later they tell you it sounded like thinking. You're not even sure how to respond to that. But you start to understand that tone isn't only about pitch, it's about intention, about vibration, muscle memory, the space between each note. This is where the non-verbal power of the drum comes in. Some drummers use touch more than sound, a soft pat that barely echoes, a roll that trembles instead of speaks. These moments are not meant to inform, they're meant to connect. At a mourning ceremony, you see an elder drummer play nothing but heartbeats, slow, regular, then suddenly broken by silence. It's the sound of someone leaving, even though no words are spoken. At a wedding, a rhythm circles like laughter, light, teasing, layered in a way that makes everyone smile, even if they can't say why. You also witness the power of the absent drum. One morning, a village sends no reply. Nothing. The silence is heavy. Your teacher frowns. They're angry, he says. You tilt your head. Or they didn't hear. He shakes his head. They heard. They waited. They chose stillness. And suddenly, you realize silence can be the loudest rhythm of all. Historians still puzzle over how deeply these emotional codes were understood across different regions. Some argue they were intimate and localized, only meaningful within tight communities. Others belied. The emotional motifs traveled with migration, becoming shared language across entire regions. But ask any elder here, and they'll tell you the truth. You don't need to be family to feel a heartbeat. That's what the drum mimics best, not just speech, but presence. You hear this most clearly during lullabies. Yes, lullabies. There's a rhythm some drummers play only at night, near the compounds where children cry. A pattern that mimics the swing of a cradle. Thump, sway, hush, thump, sway, hush. It travels barely 50 meters, just far enough to whisper. You try it one evening, feeling awkward, like you're eavesdropping on someone else's childhood. But halfway through your attempt, you hear it. The crying stops. The rhythm worked. The mother in the next hut calls out softly, "Thank you, drummer." You don't reply. You don't need to. The message landed. And then, one morning, you're called to deliver a message that isn't a message at all. The elder hands you your drum and says, "Say what cannot be said." You blink. That's the instruction? He nods. You'll know what to play when you arrive. You walk to the northern trail. A family has lost someone. The details aren't shared. You find the mourners sitting in a tight circle, eyes lowered. No one speaks. You kneel nearby, lift your drum, and wait. Your hands begin to move. You play no words, just feeling. A deep pulse, then a skip. A low tone like thunder rolling uphill, a triplet that flickers like candlelight. You're not composing. You're listening. To your own heart, to theirs, to the space between your hands and the earth. When you finish, you bow. No one applauds. That would miss the point. But someone murmurs, "It said what we needed, and that's enough." The message arrives before dawn. You hear it in your sleep first, like a dream echoing from the edge of your ribs. A slow triple beat, then silence. Then a jarring 5-beat phrase that skips like a cart with one broken wheel. Jolt upright. It's not a style you recognize. By the time you step outside, the elder is already at his drum, listening with the careful stillness of someone reading a note written in fire. You watch his expression darken. They're listening. He doesn't mean villagers, or neighbors, or friends. He means outsiders. Today, you learn a truth every good messenger eventually discovers. When you speak across the forest, anyone can hear you, even those who shouldn't. Today's lesson is about security, the way messages are shaped to hide themselves in plain rhythm. Because if the drum is a language, it can also be a weapon, and that means you must learn how to keep secrets. The first step is to realize that not all messages are meant to be understood. Some are cloaked, disguised, tangled in metaphors so layered only the intended listener can unravel them. For example, a message like, "The goats have climbed the hill with wet feet," might sound like livestock poetry, but for those in the know, it signals that scouts spotted strangers crossing the river trail under heavy fog. Or, "The yam refuses to cook, but the fire is patient," might mean that a neighboring clan has refused an alliance, but negotiations continue quietly. You're told about mirror phrasing, where key words are reversed in rhythm to confuse eavesdroppers, or shadow drumming, where a second drummer follows with the real message just behind the decoy. It's like whispering while someone reads a speech aloud, one rhythm for the crowd, another for the trusted few. One of the elders shows you how to do it. He beats out a cheerful market announcement. The palm wine flows sweet and the okra dances. But behind it, the second drummer plays something darker. The soldiers move before moonrise. Only those trained to hear both lines and trust the source would understand the warning. It's elegant, and hilling. Because once you realize that enemies are listening, every drumbeat becomes a negotiation. You ask your teacher how often messages are intercepted. He shrugs. All the time? Then why keep sending them? He smiles. Because sometimes the message they think they heard is the one we wanted them to hear. This is the real heart of the code. Not just hiding meaning, but bending it. Misdirection is its own kind of power, and the forest, with its echoes and delays, becomes a perfect theater for layered truths. Historians still argue about the sophistication of drum encryption. Some claim these layered codes were too complex to be reliable. Others point to oral traditions and eyewitness reports that describe multi-part messages with intentional noise embedded, code switching through rhythm. You're inclined to believe the latter. After all, you've just watched a message about soup conceal a troop movement. There are also silence codes. One example, if a village sends a message and receives no reply, that could mean "we didn't hear you," or "we're ignoring you." Or, if it's a very specific length of silence, your request is received but pending approval. Yes, really, timing matters. 3 pauses of equal length between phrases might signal hesitation, but 4 might signal refusal. 5, maybe agreement under pressure. It's like Morse code made out of heartbeat. You also hear stories of false messengers, travelers who learned just enough drum to mimic a village pattern, but used it to confuse, provoke, or steal. In one legend, a trader learned the rhythm for "Open the Gates" and used it to trick a rival village. The gates opened. He and his men looted the storehouse and vanished by morning. After that, some villages changed their drum accents every new moon. You wonder if that legend's true. But either way, you learn the ritual of authentication. Before certain important messages, a drum password is played, usually a phrase known only to high elders and trusted drummers. If it isn't played exactly right, the message is ignored or replied to with misleading information. "Tell the owl to wear his feathers" might sound cryptic, but to someone in the know, it confirms that the message is genuine. You try it once with your teacher. Your version, "Tell the owl to wear his claws," earns you a silent stare. That, he says, would start a war in the wrong season. You apologize. He nods. And that's why we train. You begin practicing double-layer messages. First, a cheerful outer phrase, usually announcing something routine. Then, the shadow phrase, a deeper beat hidden just behind or beneath. It's difficult. Your brain wants to focus on one rhythm at a time, but your fingers must learn to split, to walk in two directions at once. You get better. Eventually, you manage to say, "Yam festival begins at dusk," and "The trader is watching the guest with the red cloth" at the same time. It's exhausting, but exhilarating. You realize this is what the drum was always capable of, not just clarity, but complexity. A message with a mask. And sometimes, messages are sent not to be understood, but to signal confusion itself. One village, after a string of stolen goats, began sending deliberately nonsensical drum phrases every morning. "The shadow eats soup backwards," or "A frog wears a beard of fire." Why? To annoy their rivals, to flood the rhythm networks with noise, to say without saying, "We know you're listening and we're wasting your time." Petty? Absolutely. But effective. You begin to understand that drumming isn't always noble or sacred. Sometimes it's strategic. It can be used to warn, to mislead, to provoke, to tease, to confuse. And in that space between rhythm and silence, the forest becomes a chessboard. Each move deliberate, each pause loaded, and only those who've trained to hear beneath the sound know who's really winning. You hear her before you see her. The rhythm is sharp, precise, like raindrops striking palm leaves, but there's something unfamiliar about it. It doesn't follow the exact phrasing you've been taught. There's a bounce, a swing, a playful syncopation that twists the usual message form just slightly, but enough to catch your ear. You look up from your seat near the compound's fire pit and follow the sound. It's coming from a shaded courtyard at the village's edge, half hidden by a low wall of woven cane. You slip closer, curious, and that's when you see her. Gray cloth wrapped tight around her hair, posture upright, hands moving with sure, elegant rhythm. Her face is calm. Her eyes are focused, and the drum under her hands is singing. You blink. A woman, drumming. It shouldn't surprise you, and yet it does. Until now, nearly all your teachers have been men. Every public drummer, every messenger, every rhythm battle participant, male. It was unspoken, tradition, the way of things. But here, behind the clay wall, is a woman who drums with authority. She notices you, doesn't stop, doesn't smile, just says, between beats, "Come sit, if you want to learn." You don't hesitate. Today's lesson is on the hidden masters, the women who kept the language of rhythm alive, even when told they couldn't speak it. In many West African societies, the drum is a sacred object, and because of that, there are often rules: who can touch it, who can play it, when and where, and for whom. In some regions, especially those with deep ancestral or religious protocol, women were barred from playing certain drums, particularly talking drums, in public rituals or ceremonies. But behind closed doors, in kitchens, in courtyards, in songs sung while pounding fufu, they were everywhere. You find out that many women learned rhythm not from formal training, but through lullabies, harvest songs, grinding chants, and the small drew, misses used in storytelling. They didn't always use the large slit drums or the tension-laced dun-dun. Instead, they developed their own patterns, weaving rhythm into daily life. And in doing so, they preserved messages, cultural knowledge, gossip, warning signs, coded in repetition and melody. Your teacher, her name is Ma Tande, explains that when she was a child, her grandmother taught her drum phrases using only her knees and wooden spoons. First, you cook the rhythm, she says, laughing softly. Then you serve it. She teaches you a rhythm once used to warn of a sick goat in the pen. The message sounds like a lullaby, but if played faster and louder, it also signals to neighboring women that someone's child is missing. 2 messages, 1 song. You ask why she drums here in secret. She smiles. Is it secret, or is it simply not shouted? In truth, the line between visibility and erasure is blurred. In many regions, women were permitted to drum, but only for other women, or only at certain times, or only when the men were gone. And so they adapted. They taught daughters in early morning light. They drummed while sifting grain. They composed rhythms in ceremonies held in their own homes. Some women even led rhythm choirs, groups that played body percussion and clay pots, mimicking the language of the drum with voice and skin. Historians still argue how much authority these women held. Some records dismiss their rhythms as decorative. Others recognize them as a parallel tradition, a shadow system that operated beneath the male-dominated one. What's certain is that they knew the language, and in many cases, they kept it alive. During times of war, when men were sent away or lost, women took over messaging duties. They played funeral rhythms. They called in the harvest. They sent alerts to nearby families, often using cooking bowls and pestles as makeshift drums. One day, Ma Tande teaches you a rhythm that makes your fingers stumble. It's gentle, circular, unlike the crisp commands you've been practicing. She says, "This one says, I know the road, even if I don't walk it in daylight." A proverb, but also a defiance. You find out that some messages were composed for women but through the drum. Praise songs, marriage requests, private jokes. Women would reply by sending gifts, or by composing dances with footwork rhythms that answered the message without a single word spoken. You hear one such exchange recreated. Drum, daughter of the quiet fire, do you dream of yams or thunder? Dance, a twist, a turn, a stomp that means, what do you know of fire, boy with no hearth? Even the children laugh at that one. By the end of the day, you've begun to see the rhythm web in a new light. It's not a line, passed from man to man. It's a net, threaded through kitchens, lullabies, dances, harvests, and side-eyes exchanged between aunties over calabash bowls. You ask Ma Tande why she never plays in the big ceremonies. She shrugs. They have ears, she says. If they want to hear me, they will. That evening, back at the main compound, you try one of her rhythms, just softly, just once. The elder looks up sharply. Where did you learn that? You pause. From a teacher, you say. He stares at you a long moment, then smiles. Good. About time you heard the full story. It begins with a challenge. Not from your elders, not from an enemy, from someone your own age. Someone with fast hands and a grin that suggests he knows exactly what he's doing. You're barely seated under the mango tree when you hear it. Tum-tum-tum-ta-tum. Pause. Ta-ta-ta-ta-tum. It's not a message. It's a call-out. Someone's itching for a drum duel. You glance toward the far end of the compound and spot him, lean, bare-chested, seated behind a broad, polished drum. His name is Kura. He's fast, showy, the kind of drummer who can make children laugh and elders roll their eyes without saying a word. Ord, you raise an eyebrow. He grins, taps his drum again, and throws in a cheeky rhythm that sounds suspiciously like, "The new boy eats more yams than he earns." Okay, game on. Today, you're learning about the duel, not with fists, but with rhythm. This isn't some rowdy contest for bragging rights, though, let's be honest, there's plenty of that too. It's a long-standing tradition, two drummers testing wit, speed, creativity, and cultural fluency, not just to entertain, but to resolve tension. Because sometimes, rhythm speaks louder than words, and sometimes, rhythm replaces words that might otherwise end in conflict. Kura plays again. His beat is playful, irregular, almost mocking. You recognize the pattern. It's the classic tease and reply form, where the first player lays out a rhythm that contains a jab, and the second must answer it without repeating it directly. You strike your drum. Your reply is calm, steady, and subtly layered with a phrase that means, "Even a slow pot boils sweet." The crowd hums in appreciation. It's a polite burn. This is how a drum battle unfolds, not with violence, but with proverbs disguised as percussion. One beat might say, "Your goat limps even when no one watches." Another replies, "Better a limping goat than a stolen sheep." It's not just about speed or volume, it's about wit, cultural memory, improvisation. You watch two older men duel one night under the stars, trading phrases about wives, weather, and whose farm grew more cassava. The rhythms build, twist, and overlap like jazz riffs, each one teasing the other, always skirting insult but never crossing the line. Unless, of course, that's the point. Because sometimes when words can't be spoken directly, because of pride, taboo, or social rank, the drums become a safe zone for expression. Say a young man is frustrated with an elder. He can't say so out loud. In rhythm, he might play a pattern that alludes to a stubborn tree that blocks the sun. If the elder recognizes the jab, he might reply, "The sun finds its own path, even around fools." The audience laughs. No fists are thrown. Tension dissipates. Harmony restored. You find out that drum duels were once used to settle disputes between villages. Rather than send warriors, communities would send their best drummers. Each side would play their argument, masked in metaphor. The audience, or an impartial elder, would judge the outcome. It wasn't always fair, but it was usually peaceful and way more fun to watch than a spear fight. Historians still debate how formal these contests were. Some describe structured competitions with agreed-upon themes. Others suggest many were spontaneous, arising from disputes at markets, festivals, or marriage negotiations gone awkward. There's even a story about two suitors who dueled by drum for the hand of a woman. The rhythms became so romantic that she joined in, drumming a reply that said, "Neither of you knows how to stir the pot without spilling it." She married someone else entirely. You start to appreciate the layers of performance involved. A drum duel isn't just technical, it's performative memory. Each phrase carries references to history, ancestors, nature, and personal quirks. To win, you have to read the room and your opponent. You also notice that the audience plays a role. Gasps, laughter, claps. They're part of the rhythm. They shape the tempo. A good drummer rides the wave of the crowd, building suspense, then breaking it with a surprise beat that makes everyone laugh or shout. And sometimes, these duels turn into collaborations. You see it when Kura shifts his rhythm suddenly, from teasing to praise. He plays a phrase that says, "The quiet tree hides deep roots." It's a compliment. You respond with, "Even the river honors the rock it cannot move." The crowd exhales. You're no longer opponents. You're partners in rhythm. By the end, both of you are smiling. The duel dissolves into a joint. Composition, call and response, harmony, layered beats. The elders nod, satisfied. Because that's the real point of a drum duel. Not to win, but to listen, to respond, to transform tension into music. One elder later tells you, "In a village that forgets how to tease, war is always close. You remember that." Later that week, a disagreement breaks out between two families over the path through a yam field. Instead of shouting, they agree to settle it at dusk, with drums. The contest draws a crowd. The rhythm dances with innuendo. One drummer accuses the other of growing yams upside down. The other responds that his opponent couldn't find a root if it bit him. The audience howls. And by the end, they both play a final beat in unison. The path bends, but it belongs to all feet. No one wins. Everyone eats. And that's how a patch of dirt goes from conflict to celebration, without a single word spoken. You sit under the stars that night, feeling your own hands hum with leftover rhythm. You didn't just play today. You helped keep peace. You first hear the story whispered, not told like a bedtime tale, but shared like a breath someone's afraid might be stolen if they speak too loud. The drums cross the water, the elder says one evening, stirring the ashes of a dying fire. But the masters had their hands tied. You wait. He doesn't explain. Instead, he motions to a younger drummer who begins to play. It's a slow rhythm, deep, heavy, familiar, but distant, like remembering a song your grandmother hummed when you were too small to understand the words. And then, quietly, the elder says, "That rhythm was played in Saint-Domingue by those who refused to forget." Tonight, you learn the story of drum codes in resistance, how enslaved Africans carried rhythm across oceans, hiding language in music, message in beat. You listen in silence. It starts with the Idyll Passage, the forced migration of millions from West Africa to the Americas and Caribbean. Stripped of everything, they carried what couldn't be taken: memory, rhythm, call, and response. In plantation fields, they weren't allowed to speak their languages. But no one could stop the beat. It became the thread, the echo, the code. Even when drums were banned, as they often were, once colonial powers realized they could be used for communication, enslaved people found ways to continue. Wooden crates, hollow logs, stomp dances, clapped rhythms passed through chain gangs. Because rhythm remembers. Historians still piece together fragments of this hidden system. In Saint-Domingue, present-day Haiti, plantation owners reported hearing patterns of drumming just before rebellions erupted. Not random noise, messages, coded warnings, rallying cries. In Louisiana, colonial laws banned drums outright, but enslaved people found ways to mimic the talking drum using sticks and fence posts. Even banjos, brought from West African prototypes, carried rhythmic phrasing. You're told about an enslaved drummer who, according to oral tradition, carved a message into the structure of his rhythm, disguising it as dance music. The message? Tonight, the fields, come barefoot. The uprising failed, but the beat survived. It traveled into spirituals, into work songs, into the blues, into jazz, each one echoing the structure of the talking drum, not just musically but linguistically. Shifting tone, emotional phrasing, rhythmic metaphor. You ask your teacher if any of those rhythms ever came back across the ocean. He nods. There are drummers in the Americas who play our stories, he says, even if they've never been here. In Cuba, the bata drums carry sacred Yoruba speech. In Brazil, the atabaque guides candomblé rituals with patterns that resemble ancestral praise names. In the United States, the syncopation of ragtime and swing still holds the whisper of duels, gossip, praise, and warning. One day, a visiting scholar brings a recording from New Orleans, a second-line rhythm used in jazz funerals. You and the elder sit together, listening. The beat is bright, mournful, pulsing with celebration. After a moment, he taps out a response on his drum. Same tempo, different accents, but it fits. He looks at you and smiles. Same tongue, new accent. Later that week, you're asked to drum a phrase for a ceremonial procession. You want to use something traditional. The elder shakes his head. Use your rhythm, he says, not just the one we gave you. You hesitate, then begin. You blend a call you once heard in a Louisiana recording, just a snatch, with a morning rhythm from Ma Tande. You add a rolling pattern you learned during the yam harvest. When you finish, no one says anything. Then someone claps. A child starts dancing, and a grandmother says, "That rhythm walks with ghosts. It's the highest praise you'll ever receive." Later that night, the elder finally explains what he meant. When they tied our hands, we played with our feet, he says. When they banned our drums, we spoke with our bones. When they broke the language, we made a new one. But the rhythm stayed. You lie awake under the stars, listening to the night. Somewhere, miles away, a drum whispers in the dark. You don't know the message, but the shape of it, the feel of it. It walks like memory. And you begin to understand that rhythm doesn't just resist, it remembers. The drums fall silent. Not because no one is listening, but because someone else is. You feel it before you understand it, a kind of hush, like the forest itself is holding its breath, not the reverent silence of mourning or the stillness after a long message. This is a different quiet, watchful, calculated, edges tucked in. It starts when the missionaries arrive. They don't carry drums, they carry books, leather bindings, pressed pages, eyes trained on the sky. And they don't understand the rhythm in your hands. They hear music, maybe noise, certainly something powerful, but not something they trust. One asks, not unkindly, "What is it you say when you strike the wood?" You answer honestly, "We say what we need to." He nods, smiles, and says nothing more. But a week later, someone brings word from the coast. The colonial administrators have begun writing laws about noise, about gatherings, about unauthorized communication between villages. They don't name the drum, but they don't have to. Today's lesson is about interference, when drums meet empire, and what happens when a sound is too powerful to ignore. Across West Africa, the arrival of Islam, Christianity, and European colonialism brought profound changes, not just in language and dress, but in the very ways people could speak to one another. The drum, once sacred and central, suddenly became suspicious. You read an old note copied by one of the village scribes, a passage from a missionary journal dated 1873. These natives speak through the drum in ways we cannot understand. It is our duty to replace this with scripture. You feel your chest tighten. You're told that in some areas, Islamic scholars debated the use of drums. Some approved of them in moderation, especially for celebration or prayer. Others saw them as carriers of pre-Islamic tradition, symbols of superstition or idolatry. So the drum was reframed. In some Muslim communities, talking drums were softened into ceremonial percussion, stripped of their language but kept for their rhythm. Used to mark weddings, births, and public processions, but no longer to send messages. Meanwhile, Christian missionaries took a harder stance. In several colonial regions, especially in Nigeria, Sierra Leone, and Ghana, drumming was banned outright in schools and churches. It was deemed disruptive. Heathen, a barrier to salvation. But the truth? The drum wasn't dangerous because it was pagan. It was dangerous because it was independent. It allowed villages to speak to one another without colonial oversight, to warn, to organize, to remember things they were told to forget. So they were silenced. Sometimes by law, sometimes by fire. Drums were confiscated, burned, replaced with bells, or banned entirely. Even the patterns were discouraged. Children caught tapping rhythms in missionary schools were punished. Elders who drummed at night were reported. You learn about one village where the drums were buried under the council house, hidden for 3 generations. Not because they were ashamed, but because they knew they'd need them again someday. Still, rhythm refused to die. It hid in church choirs, in the clapping patterns of gospel songs, in the way preachers shouted call and response, their cadence rising and falling like a tension drum tightening under pressure. It hid in market songs sung by women selling cassava and cloth, each one laced with metaphor and layered message. It hid in children's games, which mimicked old drum messages with hand claps and chants. 1 beat, 2 beat, hide from the chief, the mango talks when the sun has teeth. You learn that in some regions resistance became ritual. One elder tells you how their ancestors drummed a funeral rhythm every Sunday morning, softly, near the mission school, just under the sound of the church bells. It was for the ancestors, she says, and for ourselves, so we wouldn't forget how to feel in our own language. Historians still debate the extent of suppression. Some records show formal bans. Others suggest a more insidious erosion, a gradual discouragement that turned drum language from common tool to fading myth. But you can read the truth in the hands of your teachers. The calluses don't lie. You ask one of them why they kept drumming, even when it brought danger. He taps the side of his head. The drum speaks, he says, but it also istens. If we stopped speaking, it would forget us. So they whispered, through coded dances, through secret rhythms played on cooking pots, through melodies that sounded like lullabies but carried old drum phrases hidden in the swing. You begin to hear it everywhere. In the cadence of folktales told at dusk, in the beat of a broom on a hard courtyard floor, in the sound of pestles pounding yam in syncopated unity, the drum never left. It just changed shape, and sometimes it tricked those who sought to silence it. One story you hear, likely apocryphal but beloved, tells of a colonial official who banned all drumming near the capital. In response, villagers began singing the drum rhythms instead. The ban didn't mention singing. Messages resumed, trade carried on, and the official, upon hearing the songs, declared them beautiful folk chants, unaware he was listening to coded gossip about his bald head and poor dancing. Petty, perhaps. Glorious, absolutely. By the time you hear this story, you've learned to smile through your rage. Because rhythm, you realize, is not just music or language. It is identity. And no law, no book, no fire can unwrite a language that lives in the body. Still, the legacy remains. In some regions today, talking drums are symbols, not tools. They're played at festivals. They sit in museums. Their messages are performed for tourists, but no longer used between real villages. That's why your teacher's drum is so precious. Not because it's old, but because it still speaks. And more importantly, it still listens. That night, you sit with the elders and ask the question you've been holding. Did we lose the language? The eldest among them lifts his drum, strikes it once, softly, then twice more, then says, "No, we only changed where we keep it." It begins with a strange rhythm. Short, sharp, familiar, but wrong. Like a word you almost recognize being said in a way that makes your skin crawl. You're seated outside the compound, practicing your market. Greetings on the drum when it hits your ear, a burst of sound from the Eastern Trail. Not a village call, not a ceremonial phrase, just a clatter of rhythm that twists something old into something new. And not in a good way. The elder beside you frowns. Who taught him to say that? You look up. Was it a mistake? He shakes his head. Worse. That rhythm knows what it's doing. You don't understand. Not yet. But today, you're about to learn about the drum that lies. What happens when rhythm, so trusted and rich with meaning, is bent into something selfish. A message, you've come to learn, is only as good as the messenger, and not every drummer has pure hands. This rhythm, delivered by a rival clan's new messenger, was technically correct, each tone well-tuned, each phrase tightly structured, but the implication that your village failed to honor a grain share agreement, it's not true, but it sounds true, because the rhythm is careful, polite, just ambiguous enough to leave a smear on your name without giving anyone the chance to call it a full insult. You ask your teacher, "Should I reply?" He thinks, then nods. But not with anger. If you shout, they win. If you whisper wisely, others will listen. So you play. The old calabash spills when no one's watching, but our gourd still holds clean water. A gentle correction, a warning in silk. The reply from the rival village never comes, but the damage has already moved. By midday, other villages begin sending curious messages. Is it true? Did you forget? Was the promise cracked like old yam? You spend the day clarifying, reassuring, and learning deeply that the drum can wound as well as heal. You've crossed into a new part of your education, the realm of propaganda rhythms. Yes, even in a culture of poetic communication and communal memory, there were those who used the drum for manipulation. Oh, the elder calls it rhythm corruption. Not the rhythm itself, but the intent behind it. A phrase can be twisted by emphasis. A pause can suggest guilt. A deliberate omission, mentioning two names in a ceremony where three are expected, can spark doubt, jealousy, feud. You hear of a case from another region, a royal drummer who, out of bitterness over being passed over for inheritance, began crafting public rhythms that subtly praised a rival clan more than his own. No one noticed at first, but months later the rival chief was invited to share a harvest. An invitation no one had intended to send. Sometimes the drum lies with flattery. A sweet rhythm sent to a trading partner might overpraise their generosity. The village replies with larger tribute. Weeks later, the sending village complains that their gift was less than before. But didn't you say we were your favored hands? A trap, sprung by kindness, echoed in wood. Historians still argue about these cases. Were they actual strategy or exaggerated stories from oral tradition? You're not sure it matters, because you've now seen it happen in real time. One evening, a drummer from a neighboring village sends a rhythmic praise for your yam fields. Excessive praise, the kind that makes the elders squint sideways. The next morning, a cart arrives uninvited, loaded with gourds and palm oil. "What's this?" someone asks. "A gift," the driver says, shrugging. "Didn't your drum promise to return the favor?" The village grumbles. They know they've been cornered. So you reply, again through rhythm. When the parrot compliments your nest, check if he's eyeing your eggs. A message with feathers and claws. Still, not all lies are malicious. Sometimes the drum bends truth for survival. During a food shortage, a village may send a message claiming full granaries, not to boast, but to deter raiders. A false signal to suggest strength. Sometimes a marriage message is softened to avoid embarrassment. Instead of saying, "The groom's father has refused," the drum might say, "The palm tree leans another way." Not a lie, but not quite the truth either. You ask your teacher how to know when to bend and when to break. He says, ask yourself, will this rhythm rot, or will it feed? You write that into your heart, because now you're starting to understand. Every message creates ripples, even small ones, especially small ones. The drum doesn't need to shout to change a life. One misphrased proverb could shame a family. One sarcastic roll could upend a trade deal. And once a message leaves the drum, it can't be taken back. The wood remembers. So what do you do when the drum lies? Sometimes you play the truth louder. Sometimes you play silence. And sometimes you craft a rhythm so beautifully phrased, so artfully layered, that it reclaims the story entirely. You do that once. You drum a reply to a false rumor that says your village's hunters were afraid of the forest spirits. You craft a rhythm that honors the spirits, then slips in. But even shadows make way for those who walk without noise. The rhythm echoes. You hear nothing back. But a week later, a new hunting song is played from that same village. It includes your line, repeated exactly. Your message has been absorbed, reclaimed. That's the power of rhetorical rhythm. You don't always fight lies with force. Sometimes you plant truth in better soil. Later, by firelight, you sit beside your teacher and ask, "Will the drum always be honest?" He shakes his head. "Never, but it can always be clear." And then he says something you'll carry with you for the rest of your life. The drum is only wood. It is the hands that choose the truth. They say he walked into the forest and never came back. Not in a tragic way. Not chased, not lost, not taken. He chose to vanish. A master drummer, old, lean, weathered like cured bark, left the compound one morning with his drum tied to his back and a gourd of water slung at his hip. He said nothing, just nodded once to his wife, once to the baobab tree, and walked into the green. That was 10 years ago. Today, you meet the silence he left behind. Your teacher tells you the story without flair, as though it's as ordinary as a misplaced sandal. He left his rhythms with the trees, he says, matter of fact. We still hear them now and then. You don't quite believe it, until you do. Because just before dawn, as the mist creeps through the low ferns and the birds are still deciding whether to sing, you hear something echo. A rhythm. Faint. Too distant to be anyone nearby. Too odd to be accidental. It doesn't follow any call or announcement you know. It's lopsided, ragged, beautiful in its imbalance. You whisper, "Is that him?" The elder nods slowly. Some say yes. Others say the forest learned his hands. You listen closer. And today, you begin to understand the idea of rhythmic legacy. What happens when the master is gone and the message remains? This old drummer, his name was Maku, was a legend. Known for rhythms so subtle, they felt like wind changes. He could make a drum cry without raising his voice. People say he once sent a marriage message that made both families cry before they heard the name. But he was secretive. He didn't teach often. And when he did, his lessons were wrapped in contradiction. Strike soft like thunder. Let your pauses speak louder than your notes. Say the truth that lies beneath the lie. People thought him eccentric. But now, years later, no one can fully replicate his phrases. They try. You try. But there's something missing, like chasing the taste of a fruit you only ever had in a dream. What's worse, some of the rhythms he created weren't rexis, boarded. He didn't pass them on. Not all, anyway. Historians would call this an oral system failure, a break in the chain, a gap in continuity. But here, it's something deeper. It's the ache of lost language. Because when a master drummer dies, or disappears, without passing on his knowledge, it's not just technique that goes, it's meaning, cultural nuance, private codes, rhythm phrases that once carried village politics, family histories, even love stories. Gone. Unless someone remembers. You ask the elder if Maku wrote anything down. He laughs. He didn't even write his name. So you do the only thing you can. You start listening. Not just for new rhythms, but for fragments. Bits of pattern played by others who once studied with him. A phrase here, a gesture there. You stitch them together like leaves caught in the same current. One day you hear a woman pounding yam in a distant compound. Her rhythm has a strange twist at the end of each cycle, almost like hesitation, but not quite. You stop, turn to your teacher. That's his. He nods. He once said, "Even the yam knows to pause before boiling." She was his niece. Piece by piece, you build a map. A boy in the market repeats a joke rhythm you know came from Maku's Moon Festival duel. A traveler from upriver mentions hearing a ghost rhythm last year, played only once, at a funeral where no names were spoken. Your hands itch to try it, to feel it. But every time you do, it slips away. Because some rhythms aren't meant to be captured, only echoed. You come to understand this. Not every rhythm survives intact. Some are scattered, some dissolve, but their shadows remain. In gestures, in phrases, in the little silences people leave at the end of certain beats without knowing why. Your teacher calls them phantom notes, marks in the air made by people who no longer need to prove they were here. There's a rhythm Maku used to play at night during Harvest Festival. No one can remember exactly what it was, but they remember the feeling, like sitting beside a fire you know will die, but you stay anyway. That's what legacy sounds like. Not presence, but residue. You realize that part of your job now is to carry the echo, not to mimic him, to honor him, to build new rhythms that carry the shape of what he left behind. Some say he disappeared because he was tired of how people used the drum, how it had become sharp-edged, political, a tool for vanity. Others say he went into the forest to teach the trees. And now, when you listen, really listen, you start to hear answers in the wind. One night, you sit alone, drumming softly beneath a fig tree. You play a rhythm you're not sure you invented. It comes from somewhere just past the edge of thought. When you finish, someone nearby says, "That sounded like Maku." You shake your head. "No, I think it sounded like me." And maybe that's the point. Legacy isn't repetition. It's transformation. The forest doesn't echo because it remembers perfectly. It echoes because it wants to keep listening. You sit in a circle surrounded by blinking lights. No fires tonight, no drums, just the soft glow of laptops, the hum of a projector fan, and a room full of curious faces. Some young, some gray-haired, many wearing headphones that look too large for the quiet reverence in their eyes. You never imagined the talking drum would find its way here, into the world of code, audio waveforms, and Wi-Fi signals. But here you are, in a university lab near the coast, watching a sound file pulse across a screen like a heartbeat in neon green. Today, you meet the digital age of the drum. It starts with a single question: can we save this language? Not just record it or mimic it, but actually translate it, turn wood and tone into code, rhythm into text. A team of local and international researchers has been trying to do just that. Digitize the structure of drum speech, pattern by pattern, so it won't vanish with time. You've been invited to help. At first, it's disorienting. The room smells like printer ink and air conditioning. The only percussion is the clicking of keyboards. Instead of calloused fingers on stretched skin, you see students scrolling through databases labeled things like drum phrase A07.wave and yam ceremony ogo.wave. But slowly you realize they're not trying to replace the drum. They're trying to hear it better. One researcher explains how they've been analyzing hundreds of recordings, some dating back to the 1950s, captured on reel-to-reel machines deep in the interior. Others come from recent festivals, WhatsApp voice notes, even old cassettes found in dusty market stalls. Each file is processed to extract tempo, pitch, rhythm gaps, and phrase structure. It's incredibly technical, but strangely familiar. Because when you watch the waveforms bounce on the screen, you see what you've always felt: the rise and fall of tone, the sway of phrasing, the unexpected pauses that mean everything. The software flags recurring patterns. "See this sequence here?" one programmer says, pointing to a jagged cluster. That shows up across 5 regions, always followed by something that sounds like a question. You lean closer. That's the wedding inquiry rhythm, you tell him. It asks if the family will speak. He pauses, then smiles. We had a hunch. It's surreal. They're mapping the drum like a language family tree, tracing how a rhythm in coastal Ghana morphed as it traveled inland, how certain phrasing shifted in post-colonial cities, or how conflict periods reduced phrase length but increased tempo. One graph shows that during periods of unrest in the 1970s, messages became shorter, faster, and more cryptic, likely to evade outside ears. You realize you're watching drum dialects evolve in real time. Historians once argued about whether the talking drum was a language or a musical code. But here, in this digital sanctum, it's clear. It's both, and more. Because it's not just about saying, come home or beware of strangers. It's about how that meaning is wrapped in rhythm, in metaphor, in a tone that says, I'm your brother, or I'm warning you, or this will be remembered. You help them decode a phrase from an old recording labeled Unnamed Archive North G02. At first, the AI translates it as goat found water near stone. Technically accurate, but flat. You listen again. Your hands move instinctively. No, you say softly. It means the drought has ended, and we found hope where we didn't expect it. Silence. The team stares at you. That's a lot deeper, one finally murmurs. And that's when they realize why they need people, not just files. Because rhythm isn't just data. It's intention. It's breath, silence, humor, heartbreak. And code, for all its brilliance, doesn't carry feeling. Still, the project presses on. They begin building an open-source library of drum phrases, carefully labeled with context, ceremonial, casual, warning, praise. You contribute dozens, sitting for hours in a small booth tapping rhythms into a sensor pad while narrating what each one means and feels. You explain where to pause, why certain phrases must begin with a metaphor, why the river speaks has different meanings depending on what came before. Some of the younger programmers begin to learn the basics. They tap out rough versions of messages and laugh when the computer mistranslates. Your fish basket sings like thunder. You grin. That means your net's too noisy. They blink. Seriously? No, you say. I just made that up. But it could mean that. The machine learns. And so do they. One of them, a soft-spoken woman with silver glasses, tells you C. He wants to design an app that can identify talking drum phrases in old radio recordings. Not to replace the drum, she assures you, but so we can hear what we didn't know we were hearing. You nod, because there's something powerful about reclaiming what was hidden in plain sound. But not everyone agrees. Some elders back in your village express concern. Will they use it properly, one asks, or turn it into a game? You don't know. Technology can be cold, detached, eager to categorize what was never meant to be boxed. But then again, what's the alternative? Let the rhythms fade into the forest, like forgotten trails? You believe there's a balance. So you propose something radical. Teach the team not just what the phrases mean, but how they were felt. You organize a trip. A few of the programmers come to the village. You introduce them to Matande, to the children's clapping games, to the rhythm duels under the mango tree. You let them hear the drum in its living form, not just from speakers, but from the earth itself. One of them watches a naming ceremony and says, wide-eyed, "We were missing half the language." You smile. Now you're starting to speak it. At night, sitting near the fire, you talk about the future. What happens when the last fluent drum messengers pass on? Will the code preserve it? Will it reduce it to symbols? Or will it spark a new way of listening? You hope for the latter, because maybe the goal isn't to save the drum. Maybe it's to remind us that we are all drummers, That rhythm is memory, and memory, when shared, becomes language again. It starts with a cough. Not yours, someone older, rough, gravelly, the kind that signals a chest that has carried too many rainy seasons. The cough comes from Matande as she lowers herself onto her stool beneath the orange tree, drum in her lap, eyes cloudy but alert. You haven't seen her in a few days. When you ask if she's feeling well, she waves you off. Just dust in the lungs, she says with a smirk. Or maybe too many lazy drummers in the air. You smile, but you feel the shift. It's subtle, like a drum that's ever so slightly out of tune. Today's lesson is different. Today, Matande doesn't teach you a rhythm. She teaches you what happens after the rhythms stop, after the hands grow stiff, after memory begins to fail. This is the lesson on passing the baton, how the elders choose who carries the rhythms forward, and what it means to become a custodian of living sound. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. Not everyone gets to stay. Some forget. Some drift. Some walk into the forest like Maku, carrying their rhythms into the soil. So when an elder begins to fade, slowly, gently, like a candle with dignity, they don't just hope their rhythms are remembered. They make a choice. Matande leans close to you now, her eyes narrow. I want to give you something, she says, but you have to take it with the right kind of silence. You nod, unsure what that means. She drums a phrase you've never heard before. Short, soft, barely there. You wait for the explanation, but she just says, "That was my mother's wedding blessing. Never recorded. Now it's yours." You don't write it down. You repeat it, hands moving slowly, reverently, until your skin knows it better than your mind. This is how rhythm survives, person to person, not just note to note. In many villages, the passing of rhythms is ritualized. You've seen it. At dusk, an elder gathers a circle of students. They begin with the standard greetings. The farm speaks. The rain listens. But then they shift. The elder plays a phrase from a funeral, one that carries a subtle variation known only to those who lived through that year's famine. You watch as each student attempts to copy it. Most fail. But one gets close. The elder nods. A few days later, that student is called aside and told, "You'll carry this rhythm forward. Practice it in the morning before the sun wakes up." It's not just ability that earns the rhythm. It's attitude, patience, listening, a willingness to honor what isn't yours until it is. In some communities, there's a term for this: listening hands, a person whose hands seem to understand rhythm even before the ears catch it. You've been called that once, just once, by Matande. She didn't say it again. She didn't need to. Because once you are seen that way, you carry responsibility. You are no longer just a drummer. You are a bridge. A keeper of what was said, what was meant, and what was almost forgotten. There's pressure in that. And doubt. One evening, you sit by yourself and wonder, what if I misremember? What if I mess up a rhythm and teach it wrong? Your teacher finds you and laughs. "Of course you will," he says. "We all do. The goal isn't perfection. It's to try honestly." He explains that rhythm, like language, grows, evolves. You're not meant to fossilize it. You're meant to keep it alive. Still, the weight is real. You begin visiting elders more often. They start offering rhythms without ceremony now, like a stream that knows it must pour before the drought. One gives you the call used when a child first walks. Another teaches you the rhythm played during a leopard sighting, used to scatter the goats and warn the nearby hunters. Sometimes, they test you. A casual greeting is suddenly inverted, the pitch lowered. It means, this is no longer a practice. Say it like it counts. You feel it in your bones. You also begin noticing who isn't being taught. The boastful ones, the distracted ones, the ones who treat the drum like a toy or a tool. They're not punished. They're just left outside the circle. Because while drumming is taught, legacy is offered. And not everyone is ready. You begin to keep a small notebook, not to write rhythms, but to make. Jot down moments, the way Ma Tande leaned into the final note. The beat that made the market women cry, even though no words were used. The pause that spoke of a father's disappointment more clearly than any sentence. You're not just learning what is played, you're learning why it matters. One night, a child asks you to drum a bedtime story. You craft something gentle, a rhythm about a fox who lost his shadow, then found it again in the moon's reflection. The child giggles, sleeps before the rhythm ends. Later, Ma Tande smiles at you and says, "You've begun." You ask, "Begun what?" She taps her drum, then your shoulder, becoming the rhythm others will remember. And you finally understand, rhythm doesn't die when it's not played. It dies when no one carries it with love. So you make a quiet promise to yourself, not just to preserve, but to share, to teach with patience, to listen before striking, to carry not just the beat, but the story beneath it. And to remember, when an elder gives you a rhythm, they're not just giving sound, they're giving trust. So treat it like fire, not to burn, but to warm what comes next. It begins with a journey you didn't expect to take. Not a trip across oceans or even across provinces, but a return to the place where you first heard the drum, not just with your ears, but with your spirit. The compound where your teacher first called you over. The mango tree where you learned your first rhythm. The fire where Ma Tande told stories with her hands instead of her mouth. You walk those spaces slowly now, as if the ground itself is draped in a rhythm you no longer need to play to feel. But today's lesson is different. Because today, you are asked to teach, not assist, not demonstrate, but lead. A small group of children waits near the carved bench. Some giggle nervously, others try to mimic rhythm patterns on their knees. One is already holding his drum upside down. You take a breath. This isn't about passing a test. It's about seeing whether the rhythm that's been carried into you can now be carried through you. You start gently, simple greetings, soft phrases. But as you watch their faces, their fingers fumbling and laughing, something shifts in you. You remember what it was like to be them, the pressure, the confusion, the ache of wanting to play it right so badly you almost forget to enjoy it. So you make a choice. You start telling stories, not with words, but with rhythms. You play the tale of a stubborn tortoise who challenged the thunder, only to end up soaked and wiser. You strike quick notes for thunderclaps, slow rolls for trudging steps, and one long deep beat to mark the moment he realizes his mistake. The kids laugh. One even claps midway. You grin and say, "Now you try." Their rhythms are messy, but they're alive. You don't correct everything. You let them find the story in the silence. This, you realize, is how it continues. Through joy, through error, through the hands of those who still believe rhythm can say what language cannot. You teach them how to feel a message before decoding it. You tell them, a drum is not just a sound, it's a decision. One girl asks, "What if I decide wrong?" You answer, "Then the drum will teach you. It always does." Later that week, your old teacher watches your lesson from the edge of the courtyard. When it ends, he nods. No praise, just understanding. You sit beside him afterward, the kids gone, the air cooling as night begins to settle. He asks, "Do you feel the rhythm differently now?" You think about it, then nod. It's quieter, but deeper. He hums in approval. Good. That means you've stopped playing at the drum and started playing with it. You realize that for all the years you spent trying to strike the right tones, the real transformation came when you started letting the drum shape you back. Because this rhythm has always been a mirror. It reflects the heart behind the hands. That night, you drum alone under the stars. Not to send a message, not for ceremony, just to sit with the rhythm itself. You begin with a phrase from your first year. The moon watches those who walk without shadows. Then, without planning, you slip into Matande's wedding blessing. Then a phrase you learned from the university team, the one hidden in an old radio broadcast. Then one of your own, a rhythm you built for no one in particular, but which feels like a sigh in the shape of sound. The wind rustles, something distant hoots. You pause and feel, not just the beat, but the stillness between the beats. The space where memory sits, the gap where ancestors speak. Historians still argue about when the talking drum began. Some date it back to the knock, or even earlier. Others insist it wasn't a language until much later. Some say it was never a language at all. But they're all missing the point. Because the drum was never about when it began. It's about why it never stopped. You hear that now, in the quiet, in your own heartbeat, sinking slowly with the final echoes of your phrase. The next morning, you gather the children again, but this time you ask them to bring a rhythm. Some look nervous, some excited. They fumble, they guess. One boy plays what he claims is a greeting for a fat lizard who stole a mango. You laugh, because the rhythm actually does sound like that. Another girl plays something hesitant but sweet. She says it's about waiting for the rain to come. You feel your throat tighten. You say, "That's exactly what it sounds like." She grins wide enough to light up the courtyard. Later, you pull her aside. You tell her she has listening hands. She doesn't know what it means yet, but someday she will. You begin writing your rhythms down, not in full notation, but as phrases, like those your elders whispered to you. Not 3 high notes pause 1 low, but the fire remembers even when it's ash. The goat doesn't argue with thunder. Spiam, softly, and the trees will reply. You place these phrases in a small cloth-bound journal, along with a note at the front. For the one who finds this after I am gone. These are not rules. They are doors. Walk through them with bare feet and open ears. You don't know who will read it, but you know someone will. Because this is how rhythm moves through time, not as a song stuck in amber, but as a living breath, passed hand to hand, heartbeat to heartbeat. And you're no longer the student. You're the echo, and the source, and the space between. The final fire burns low. You're not alone, though no one speaks. The village sits quiet in that familiar hush that comes just before ceremony. No rustling, no laughter, just that warm press of anticipation, like the earth itself is waiting to exhale. Tonight is not about celebration, it's about returning. Returning rhythms, returning names, returning the echoes of hands long gone into the open air. You're standing just outside the circle, drum resting on your hip. You've been asked to play the opening phrase. Not the main story, just the key that unlocks the night. It's an honor, a signal, a statement. You strike the drum once, soft, centered. Then again, with a slight lift. Then a third time, rising like smoke from the coals. The rhythm you play is simple, old. It means the talking has begun. You hear someone sigh across the circle. Another begins to play, an elder, one of Matande's oldest cousins. Then another. One by one, the drums fall into place like stars appearing after sunset. The rhythm becomes a conversation, not frantic, not planned, just memory meeting memory in the form of beat. Each player adds something, a morning phrase here, a harvest roll there. Some patterns you know, Others you only half recognize, but you feel them in your skin. One rhythm catches your attention. It's the forest greeting, the one they say Maku used to play before disappearing. It flows past like a drifting feather. You close your eyes. Let it pass through you. Tonight is about remembering together. At some point, a child joins in, then another. Their drumming is uneven, unsure, but no one corrects them. Because rhythm isn't about perfection tonight. It's about presence. And this, you understand now, is the final lesson. Not in silence, not in metaphor, but in being part of the rhythm without needing to lead it. You shift your playing, softer, more spacious. You leave gaps for others to fill. You echo what's played across from you. You offer little threads of melody for someone else to pull. And in doing so, you realize you've become what your elders once were to you. A listener, a holder of space, a steward of sound. Matande is here, bundled in her woven shawl. She doesn't play anymore, her hands too stiff. But she nods along. And when your eyes meet, she mouths the words, "Well done." Later, long after the drums fade into coals and the children fall asleep beneath raffia mats, you sit alone by the ashes. The moon is full, painting silver outlines on the empty stools. You pick up your drum again, not to announce, not to perform, just to remember. You play a rhythm with no name, one that feels like a goodbye without sorrow, a phrase that says, "We are still here, and that is enough." You play it twice, then stop. The silence that follows isn't empty. It's complete. Because the rhythm continues, even when the sound ends. It lives in the bones of the village walls, in the stories woven into baskets, in the footfalls of the children learning to walk with syncopated steps. It lives in you. And when someone someday picks up your drum and plays a rhythm they don't know came from your hands, you will smile, wherever you are, because you'll know. The message arrived. The rhythm was carried. The drum still speaks, and the forest still listens. Wind down, 300 words, and now your journey has brought you here to stillness. The fire has cooled, the drums are sleeping, and all that remains is the soft rhythm of your breath, rising and falling like waves washing against the memory of something ancient. You've walked long trails tonight, through forests, through villages, through silence and sound. You've sat with elders who passed on secrets shaped like rhythm and listened to stories told without words. You've watched drums speak in ways books never could. And in those patterns, those pauses, you've felt the heartbeat of something older than history and gentler than time. Let that stay with you now. Let it echo, not in your ears, but in the quietest corner of your spirit. Remember how a single beat can carry a message across miles, how a pause can be as powerful as a word, how a story can live inside a drum, waiting for someone like you to listen. You don't need to do anything more tonight. No more lessons, no more rhythms to memorize. Just the warmth of knowing you were part of something sacred, something passed hand to hand, heart to heart, from a world that still whispers beneath the noise of the everyday. Let that whisper carry you. Let it soften your breath. Let it carry you to rest. The drums are quiet now, and that's exactly how it should be. Good night.